All right, let's see who's coming in.
Hey, yeah. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
They're coming in. Hey, folks.
How are y'all doing? Give it just a minute for everyone to get in the room and get settled.
Well, so Kat, you can see people coming in?
See under
Yes.
participants, Sally? You see under participants? Mine's down on the bottom, across the bottom. Put your cursor to the right of the pictures of us, and all of a sudden across the bottom, it'll show participants and chat and Q&A.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's helpful. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, and you'll see the little number jumping.
22, and it'll keep going. Yeah. And that's where I'll find the questions in the Q&A.
Yeah.
That many people are there.
Jim's right though, you can't get in anymore. That's a shame. I bet my kids are trying, but they won't be able to get in. You had to get in early.
25.
Does everyone have that on or just us?
I believe everyone has that.
Yeah, everyone has the opportunity to see that across the bottom. Yes.
Good.
Mine goes away unless I move my cursor.
Yeah. Well, mine didn't go away.
Okay.
Now it did.
We only have speaker view because this is more of a webinar than a Zoom group.
Right.
So the people that I have a friend coming in, she says, I won't be able to be seen. Well, it's like, you come in.
Yes.
Now, but are we on yet? Or
Yes.
Yes.
Can they hear us?
Yeah.
They can.
Oh my, hello. Oh dear.
We are live and folks are coming in.
29.
Well, I think we should welcome them.
Well,
Yes, we're glad
welcome.
everyone's here.
yeah.
We've got Doris saying hi, Sally.
Hey, Doris, hey, she's in California.
Well,
I'm
hello,
glad to see her.
California.
Californian.
Wow.
Yeah, you can look under chat and see if anybody is saying hi.
Oh, 4 have said hi, I guess.
Yeah, I can't see. Oh, because people can chat to all of us or just individually to different ones of us.
Right.
So like, I don't have a personal chat yet. Somebody say hi to me. Let's see. Hi, everyone, from Nancy Lindman. So Sally, I saw Penny's list and I knew some of the people she was emailing, like Ann Fisher-Worth and Maud Schuler-Clay, and can't remember a couple of others.
Well,
Maud's
me in Mississippi, and you knew those folks.
There
there's
go.
Carol Stout. Hey, Carol.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got a hi, Sally from John in Bakersfield.
Oh, Natalie Falls.
Okay.
Hey, Natalie.
All right.
Hey, Amy.
Oh, hello, Bakersfield. Yay.
Hey, Amy.
I think now that we've got folks getting in, we've got Steve Yates from University of Princeton.
Yes, Mississippi.
Hello.
Good. Well,
We're setting this up.
Were it not for Steve, we wouldn't be here.
Absolutely. Okay. We can go ahead and sort of get started. I'll kind of give the lay of the land, run of show. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here. We certainly wish we were doing this in person, in Novel, and hopefully on the other side of this, we can all get together to celebrate the publication of The Power of One, Sister Ann Brooks and the Tutwiler Clinic. But today, we're so grateful that you guys and then everybody at home are tuning in, letting us into your living room or kitchen or office, wherever you may be, to talk books for an evening. And we are grateful to author Susan Cushman for being our moderator and interviewer for the evening, our hostess, if you will. We've hosted Susan at Novel multiple times for author signings, to launch her books, for a writing workshop that we did in 2018. Susan has written 3 books and edited 3 collections. And her latest book is a collection of short stories called Friends of the Library that's available here. And of course, she's good. I had a copy here and realized my virtual background doesn't allow me to show books. So yeah, that's available. We've also got Southern Writers on Writing, which is, thank you, Susan, a collection that she edited that is also University Press of Mississippi. So yeah, we are so grateful. Susan is also one of the most staunch supporters of fellow authors in the South that I have seen. So I will, the way this will work is I will let Susan take it away in just a second, and I'll hide myself, and she will interview our authors. And then if everyone wants to take a look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box. And as you think of a question, feel free to go ahead and put that question in the Q&A box. And then once Susan's done interviewing the authors, she will then ask the authors some of your questions, whatever we have time for. And if you have comments and all of that, feel free to enter those in chat. But if you've got a specific question you'd like to ask the authors, go ahead and put it in Q&A. And without further ado, I'll let Susan take it away. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Nicole, so much. Thanks to Novel for hosting us. I know it's a bit of work, and I do wish we were in person, but hey, this is the next best thing. Thanks again to University Press of Mississippi, to Craig Gill and Steve Yates and all the great people there. They're awesome to work with, and we're so excited. I know that in addition to The Power of One, Sister Ann Brooks and the Tutwiler Clinic, they also published Sally's previous book, Delta Rainbow, The Irrepressible Betty Bobo Pearson. And Sally, even though she's been living in Memphis for 50 years, she keeps getting asked to write about these awesome women in the Mississippi Delta. Mississippi's my hometown, so I'm a little bit jealous. It's like, ask me. But Sally's awesome at these kinds of books, and she's had a whole lot of help from Jean Fisher here. Welcome, Jean. Glad to have you here too as well. So Sally was born and raised and educated in California. But that's okay, we forgive her because she's lived in Memphis for over 50 years. She retired as a Dean of Continuing and Corporate Education at Rhodes College, and she's authored 4 books so far. And my connection to Sally is when I moved into this house here in Harbortown 6 years ago, I discovered Sally was across the street, and she's been an inspiration and a mentor and a writing buddy, and just, it's so special to me. And Jean is a licensed clinical social worker at Lakeside Behavioral Health System here in Memphis. Previously worked at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. She also contributed to Delta Rainbow, the previous book. So I know she and Sally are a great team. And so we'll get started talking about this book. And it's about Sister Ann Brooks, who for 34 years, she's a Catholic nun and a doctor of osteopathy, but for 34 years, she served one of the nation's most impoverished towns, Tutwiler, Mississippi. I'm not going to tell you anything more about her because I'm going to let Sally and Jean do all the chatting. But please also remember to send us questions to the Q&A, and we will get to those. So hi, Sally and Jean. Let's tell us about the book's inception, and also Pammy Mayfield's part in that, and Jean's part in it. So whoever wants to, give us an introduction.
Thank you, Susan. I have to say a few thank yous, first of all, for Susan, because she's the one that organized this ability to have the Zoom. And although I would much prefer to have it in person, in a way, I think it's very fortunate because I just saw Leslie from New Zealand join in, and hey Les, oh, thank you for being here, and Doris from California, and Bill from Bakersfield. Here we are, and how honored and wonderful it is for, I wish I could see you, but I just knowing your spirits there is just fabulous. And so I really thank you. Susan asked me about the inception of the book, and it was really a very interesting way that happened. About 2.5 years ago, I got a phone call from a woman who lives in Clarksdale, Mississippi, Panny Mayfield, who said, Sally, Ann Brooks has read your book, The Delta Rainbow, and wonders if you would be willing to write her book, a memoir of her life, because she's getting ready to retire. And I said, oh, well, that sounds very interesting. I'll go down to Mississippi and see and talk to her and see what if it's a good match. And so I asked my husband, John, buddy, to accompany me down to Tutwiler. We went down and met the amazing Ann Brooks. And in her very soft-spoken, yet really just ability to connect immediately, I knew that this was a story I wanted to pursue. And so, but I thought, you know, here I am writing about the Delta. I like to do things in a team way. And so I said, I think I can do it. I think I would very much like to do it. So Panny said, great. And she went to her car and got 4 cartons of notes and put them in the trunk of my car and said, here's your background. So I thought, wow, all the research is already done. Now this is a good deal. And so I drove off and I got home and I called Jean Fisher. And I said, Jean, I need your help. I want you to do something with me and let's write another book. And she said, what? And so I said, you know the Delta, you know the folks, I need your help. And she said, what did you say, Jean?
I probably said yes, Sally.
She did indeed say yes. And so we were off. And so we started our research and we started the book, and we found that it was one of the most interesting and powerful stories. And so here it is, The Power of One. And Susan, are you going to ask us questions, or you just want me to talk?
I've got plenty of questions for you.
All right, go ahead, ask us another question.
Well, in the preface of the book, Sally states her goals as to capture Sister Ann's voice and memories, and her questions, her personal longings, and her deep faith. These are pretty lofty goals for a memoir. So I want to know, how did you approach her, Sister Ann, Dr. Brooks, the person, the nun, the healing professional? How did you approach her to discover all the treasures of hers that you share with us?
Well, we really did want to try to make it Ann's book, because in knowing her and getting to know her and then reading through all of her writings, we realized this is a very unique person. And so we wanted to be able to capture like a word portrait, but it's kind of ridiculous to think that another person can write someone's memoir. And I think your question is very good, because I realized in looking back and thinking about your question, I hope it captures Ann in the way that she lived, in the many different ways and aspects of her personality and accomplishment. But I realized that there's part of what I like. Now, you, as a first reader of some of my drafts, and Jean, as a first reader of the draft, said, Sally, we don't really need all this information about her heritage and who she is. Now, I have to admit, I used to be a history teacher, and I love history. And I also think that someone's history is part of who they are, a very big part of who they are. In fact, I was just thinking about that today, and I thought, you know, I think some of the problems that we're having in our day's world is they don't even teach history or as a required subject in high school anymore. And I think that people don't know who they are as Americans, but that's another subject. But I do think that Ann's heritage is in a way a part of her, even though when she became a nun, she completely renounced it, but that's another story. Her grandfather was, both of her grandfathers were very, very accomplished men and women of the grandmothers, because her grandfather on her mother's side was a German who came to America. He was a German scholar, and he really started the Society for Literature, German literature, here in the United States. He taught at Stanford, he's taught at Harvard, and he ended up at the University of Illinois. And then her grandfather on her father's side was an electrical engineer who was a very accomplished an inventor. And so here she had this very rich intellectual, inventive, literary tradition that she must have in some way growing up. Both grandfathers actually ended up at the, in Urbana at the University of Illinois. So she was growing up, and her mother grew up in that environment. And so that's got to rub off on her. And so that's part of why I put that in there. And then,
and I'm going to interrupt you for just a minute. Jean, I don't know how you feel, but I finally came to agree with Sally that I wanted this background in there. I pushed back a little bit at first, but especially I love what she did with the childhood and what all happened in Anne's childhood. I don't know, did you come to see that too, Jean, as well, the importance of that to the book?
Yes, and of course you've got to question why a woman with that sort of rich background, and that included money, how she got to Tutwiler, Mississippi, and made such a stance there. And in a bit, we'll talk about what Tutwiler was all about.
Absolutely.
She also had this very troubled childhood that Sally might want to tell you more about that. But she, and her bout with rheumatoid arthritis that crippled her, and she was able to be healed from that. All of this adds to her strength and what she brought to what she did later for people.
well, and you know, I do think that when Jean and I started out there's one other thing I would like to say about just the organization of the book and why it really is not a memoir, in that I realize another part of what I was fascinated with is I love to read a book that has the epigraphs at each chapter, and then to look at the theme of the chapter and see what other writers and other people have done and said about that. And it was just amazing to me to find quotes from other people who so personified the power and the care that Anne brought to her life. And so that was just another way that you have to say it's not a memoir, but it is certainly captures who Anne Brooks is and what she accomplished. And I do think that part of what is very interesting to me is that she did have a power that was unique, and it was just an amazing thing. And so when Jean and I started talking about it, I was researching and looking at it from the individual, and Jean said, wait a minute, there's another power that is working in this story. And Jean, why don't you tell what you think about that?
All right, well, we start in the beginning of the book by saying this is a story of two powers. One of them is the power that Anne has, that she brings with her devotion to her work, and it's a story of two opposing powers. And the other power is the terrible, horrific poverty in the place that she chose to do her work. And you see that as a struggle that she has all the ways from the very first time she got there. Shall I set the stage by telling you what she did, where she came, where she landed?
Well, why don't you tell us a little about Tutwiler and what the power of Tutwiler was?
Yeah, I was going to read, if I could do that, read what we have in the book, but it's from 60 Minutes, a program. Anne had this ability to attract attention, which led into money coming into the clinic. And the two most outstanding ones were, first, there was an article in People magazine, and it was titled "Practicing Without Preaching." One of the editors from 60 Minutes saw this article in his dentist office when he was there just getting his teeth cleaned, and he was so struck with this that he tore out the article and took it back to 60 Minutes, and they did a program on 60 Minutes, and Harry Reasoner was the person who did the program, introduced it. We considered, Sally and I considered, this book title is The Power of One. And obviously this is a woman who had the power, and she was like a magnet, pulling other people of like mind to Tutwiler. And that's what helped her make success. But we considered the title to be When the Lights Came On Again in Tallahatchie County, because we saw it as a dark, dismal place. Harry Reasoner introduced it saying it, every so often we get a letter here at 60 Minutes about a person so unusual or a place so extraordinary, we just have to take a look for ourselves. Well, tonight we have a double header. A doctor, Sister Ann Brooks, D.O., like no one you've ever met in a place like none you've ever been. Tutwiler, Mississippi, a principal town in Tallahatchie County, a place so impoverished, they call it America's third world. And he goes on to say that it was a region so economically devastated that Congress had declared it the poorest place in America. After World War I, as agriculture became mechanized, much of the Delta land was purchased by large corporations that replaced thousands of sharecroppers and field hands in the area. Employment was hard to find. People had been replaced. There was more nutrition and disease in the Tutwiler area than found in third world countries. More babies died before their first birthday in Panama, Haiti, or Mexico. The infant mortality rate was 23 deaths per 1,000 births, more than twice the national average. 1/5 of the babies born in Tutwiler were born to teenage mothers, twice the national average. When she came to Tutwiler, it was to come to repay the money that had been given to her by federal funds to do her medical degree. And they were surprised when she stayed because they had not been able to keep a doctor. The clinic had been closed for 5 years because no doctor would stay and work and live in that area because it was so poor and grim. He gave,
excuse me, Jean, I was just thinking, I think one of the, I think to envision the poverty that was there, one of the things that was so striking to me that was brought out is that the Tutwiler is built along a bayou, and then there was the black side of the town and the white side of the town. And the bayou was right next to the black side of the town, and when it rained, it flooded, and the people that were living in the shacks in the black side of the town along the bayou just took their toilet. They didn't have inside plumbing, so they just took their refuge and just threw it into the bayou to get rid of it. Well, when it flooded, all of that, along with the snakes and the dead animals, came back up into their property and into their houses. And that's the kind of situation that the people in Tutwiler were living in when Anne moved to Tutwiler. And so that, I think, is such a graphic description and vision of what was going on. And we'll get into some of the other issues that I think, but Susan, I think you had some other questions.
Yeah, talking about her childhood, I think y'all touched on the fact that she had rheumatoid arthritis, that but that she came from a broken home and she went to Catholic school, even though.
I think that I think that's a very important part of what, you know, Jean was mentioning, that she was coming from. Well, let me just tell you a little more about her background, because it is her parents met at the University of Illinois in Urbana, and they were there together. Her father was a little older than her mother, and then this was during World War I when they met, and he was very patriotic, and he said, I have got to get into this and I want to join the Navy. And so he, though then, I guess through connections or whatever, he got an appointment to go to Annapolis, and he then transferred to Annapolis. And just as World War I was over, he graduated and he became a commissioned officer. And so then he could marry his college sweetheart. They were married. And so they started life together. But because he was in the Navy, he was stationed on a ship and then going all over the world. So his wife, Anne's mother, whose name was Anne, oh, by the way, that's a very important part of her story. She was born and christened Catherine, and everyone in her life called her Kitty. And so anyway, her mother was Anne, and she lived in Urbana, and then she would go to the various ports that were very interesting to see her husband. But finally, when they were both in their 40s, her father was then assigned to Washington, D.C. They moved to Washington, D.C., and that's the first time they had a home together, and they had a child. So Anne was born when her father was 41 and her 42, and her mother was 40. And so here they were with this little baby in their middle years, and then World War II started, and he was a commissioned officer. He was sent over to the Pacific Ocean. She was living in Washington, D.C., away from all of her friends in Urbana, away from all of her, she had four brothers and 2 sisters, all away from all of her family, and she was in a neighborhood that she knew no one. And the really horrible thing for her was that it was kind of full of Catholics, and she was very anti-Catholic. So she said to little Anne, as Anne started to grow and make friends in the neighborhood, you are not to play with any Catholics. And of course, that was defied. But anyway, here she was, a wife, mother, who had no friends in Washington, D.C., and she was living there all by herself with this child, who then went to Sidwell, which is probably the most prestigious grammar school in the country, where the president's children of several, that's where Clinton's, and Obama's and Nixon's children went. Anne went to Sidwell. And there was, the school bus picked her up every day and took her. She came home and walked in to a house where her mother had her glass of bourbon in front of her and smoking her cigarettes, and she had become an alcoholic. Her mother did. Well, okay, war was over, Daddy came home, they got fine, but then in 2 years, it was bedlam. They separated and begged her father to take her. He was reassigned to Key West, Florida, and Kitty begged to go with her daddy. So she went down to Key West. Her daddy was going to live in the bachelor's quarters, BOQ, and he thought, what am I going to do with this little girl? She's 10 now. And so There was a convent school there in Key West. And so he takes her over. She takes a test. She's so far advanced, she skips a grade and goes into the convent school and is introduced to Catholicism, which it was just overwhelming. All the symbolism, which she had never encountered before. She was just overwhelmed at first, but the nuns and the sisters and her teachers were so wonderful to her. By the time the year was over, she was very, very much felt cared for and loved. And she said, I am going to become a Catholic. I am going to become a nun. Now, parents divorced. She then moved back with her mother back to Washington, D.C., and finished at a Catholic high school in Washington, D.C. because her friends there in D.C., who she had made in defiance of her parents' edict against being the Catholics, she was the diocese there supported her. She went to Catholic school and she went to the convent, and she did become a nun, but on that way, she developed severe arthritis that crippled her. So when she became a nun, she was crippled, and so she started teaching school and from a wheelchair, and so she was crippled for 18 years, and that's the beginning of Anne's life as
yeah. And there's a connecting story here about the doctor of osteopathy who cured her.
Well, that was very interesting because Anne then, in addition to teaching, she became involved, and she wanted to help at a free clinic there in well, she was teaching in Clearwater, and I think the clinic was there in right outside, was 40 miles away. So she wanted to live in the clinic. She started volunteering at the clinic, this free clinic there. It was in St. Petersburg, and she was so good. They asked if she would be the director of the clinic. So she talked to the officials in the church, and she became the director of that free clinic. And she was standing, then physicians from the town would come in and volunteer their services and at night, and that's when most of the indigent people would come in to be treated. And she was standing one night watching one of the doctors, Dr. Upledger, treating a patient. He looked up and saw her leaning against the door jamb and said, "What's wrong with you?" And she said, "I hurt." And he said, "Well, why?" She said, "Well, I have a back brace on. I've got this, I can't walk without my back brace." She'd gone through all these treatments. And so he said, "Well, I could help you." And she said, "What do you mean you could help me?" And he said, "Well, I just took a course in acupuncture and I think I can help you." She said, "Oh, no, I don't want any of that." Well, he said, "Well, think about it and call me." Well, she thought about it, and typical of Anne, she did all of her research on it. And in about 3 weeks, she went to Dr. Upledger, and that started a treatment of her. He was a doctor of osteopathy, and it started her treatment for over 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, after 18 years in a wheelchair and a body brace, she was able to walk up the stairs for the first time. And so she really just owes so much of her life to Dr. Upledger.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So she brings all of that background down to Tutwiler, Mississippi, which is, by the way, Tallahatchie County, right where Emmett Till was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that, had a lot of effect on her and the community. And I was thinking about how she fought racism. What all did she bring to the table in addition to her medical care to fight racism? I know I read about some things in the book that she did and made happen there at the clinic and in the community. If y'all would like to talk about some of those things.
Well, the first thing she did when she came to the clinic, she took down the wall that divided the clinic's waiting room into white waiting room, black waiting room. She took it down and had one waiting room. She also had to establish the trust, the people trust in her, because after all, she was a white woman. And one of the things that toward the end of the time that she was there that she talked about that was so thrilling to her was one of her patients came up and said, I'm going to give you a hug, even if you are a white woman. She established what she called Pearly Gates insurance. When she got there, people had not been coming to the doctor because they didn't have the money, even though it was a little bit of money for them to come. And they said that her office and her home at night after hours was like an emergency room, because people had such horrific heart troubles, diabetes, obesity, other problems that hadn't been addressed because they didn't go get the care because they were scared of the money. And she got her Pearly Gates insurance that she said was, she didn't want to get to the Pearly Gates and St. Peter, is that who it is, would say to her that she'd have to tell him that she didn't treat somebody because they didn't have the money. And she'd get the money to fund her Pearly Gates insurance from all of the activity that she, and the publicity, like the People magazine and 60 Minutes. The racism, I think, was something that was just inherent with all of it. And I think the real answer to your question is she ignored it. The person was the person in front of her and needed help, and it didn't matter if they were black or white.
Yeah.
A lot of the people in the area, white people, found out about her and her fine care. So about 20% of her population that she treated was white. So they were mixed, intermingled.
And they would pay with when they went to the clinic. Excuse me, one thing I forgot to say that with Dr. Upledger, he encouraged Anne to go to, to medical school, osteopathic school. And she said, well, I don't think I can even pass chemistry. And he said, well, give it a try. She did, and of course she got A's in chemistry. And so then she went to her, the religious authorities and said, I think I want to go to medical school. But she said, I can't pay for it. And they said, well, there's a government program. If you pledge to give 3 years of service in a place of need, then you can go. And then we will pay for your training. And so she did go to medical school. It's amazing what she accomplished there, but we won't go into it tonight, but you have to read the book. But
Buy and read the book.
This is how she ended up in Tutwiler, because she had the obligation to go, but this was not an obligation to her. This is what she wanted, and this is what she felt like it was providential, and it ties into exactly what you were asking about the Till trial. When she was entering the convent to become a nun, was 1955, and it was September, and it was at the time of the Emmett Till trial in Sumner, Mississippi. And she started, and she followed that completely, and just the whole thing. And she later in her life actually met Emmett's mother, and it was just, that became just such a important part of shaping her character. And so when she was called, when she went down to Tutwiler, she felt it was almost providential that she was going to serve there. And so that, I think, was a very important part of her character building and what was going on.
Absolutely. You know, some of the things that I know she did there included private reading lessons, an emergency food bank, home repairs.
I've got a list. I got a list right here.
Talk about some of that. To me, it's amazing she did more than, I mean, it was enough to be the doctor.
It was her
Right.
philosophy that you treat the whole person. You don't just treat the disease. She said you can't cure people, but you can support them, and they need the whole personality. And she did, when the minute she got there, she opened the clinic and started seeing sick patients, but she realized their sickness was so beyond just the patients. And Jean said she had a list of the things she started, and it's an amazing story.
I gleaned a list of this because we see it in bits and pieces in the book, but here's what happened after 20 years. They had GED training with 45 graduates. A community center opened, a daycare center, sexual abuse awareness training, literacy classes, a food bank, a clothes closet, a grocery carpool system, home repair clinics, nutrition training, exercise classes, parenting classes, death and dying support group, Delta Habitat, the bargain barn where they had clothes for not much money, a quilting project, medical donations, and 175 children and teens in aftercare programs. Plus, she added 4 additions to the building and a satellite clinic. This was a busy lady.
Absolutely. I love that.
All of that was designed, as Sally said, to treat the whole person.
And the whole community.
The whole community.
You know, this is one of the things, about 3 or 4 years after she got to Tutwiler, she started some of these programs immediately there at the clinic and was getting volunteers, but she wanted to be able, she wanted a staff, and she wanted to be able to pay people for their service there at the clinic. And so she had a way of recruiting people, because she got to know them and their character. And then someone who might not, well, the person who became her main assistant was someone who was working up at the Clarksdale hospital in just record keeping, but she recognized that she was a doer and could do things, and so she recruited her to come be her main administrator of the clinic, Cindy Herring. So, but she also attracted another nun who was a community organizer, and who was from California, but Maureen, oh gosh, anyway, she came, and she heard about Anne, and she came to Tutwiler and was so impressed with what Anne was doing. Sister Maureen said, okay, well, I want to come help you organize and the things outside of the medical care that you are giving. And so she said, I'll start, talking to people and find out what they want.
Right.
And she expected them to say better housing and more jobs and such. Well, the first thing they said when she said, we just want to clean up the town. And so here she had, and so she said, oh, and so she went to the white section of town and the black section, and they came together and they cleaned up the town. And they said, now the town is getting cleaned up, let's put street signs up to put on the street so people will know where to go. And so they made street signs out of scrap metal. And then, Jean, I think, didn't you say what was about the Christmas parade?
Yeah, they wanted to have a Christmas parade, and they didn't have any decorations. So a town close to them, Webb, was more affluent, and they had thrown away their Christmas decorations. So they went and got them and refurbished them, painted the balls silver and put wreaths on it. They had a Christmas parade, and they got a little band together for Tutwiler, and they also invited bands from around. So that, again, it was black and white participation.
I love it.
All of this was designed, and that's why we call her the light in the darkness, because it wasn't just in the clinic, it was for the whole city.
She's amazing. You know, y'all talk about her power and that the power of one, but there was two powers at work here. Well, I also think there's two glass ceilings that she broke with her power. And of course, we talked about allopathic medicine, but what about the glass ceiling of patriarchy? That's mentioned, and how did she break that glass ceiling in her work?
Well, the clinic's hospital, the closest hospital to the clinic was the regional hospital up in Clarksdale, which was about 20 miles away from Tutwiler. And this is where she got on the staff of the Clarksdale regional, or the regional hospital in the area. And she was teaching classes and doing things that doctors do at hospitals. And after about 10 years, she was the first woman chief of staff of the regional hospital there in Tallahatchie County. Just
So she
because
succeeded in
they
amazing
so
work.
respected her
Yeah,
for what she did.
that's awesome.
And it was particularly unusual because she, as you mentioned, she was an osteopath, and most of the people were medically trained in the allopathic tradition. But I think that now much of what the osteopaths were saying, treating the whole person, I think that she was showing how you do this, and I think there was a very beautiful blend there.
That's awesome. You know, before, I've only got like one or two more questions before we're going to go to the audience questions. So just want to remind y'all to send some questions into the Q&A section, because we've got just a couple there. We'd love to have some more there. So before we go there, I was thinking about, Sally, I know you visited Sister Ann first in Tutwiler, and later you visited her in New York in the retirement community for nuns up there. And I wanted to know how she is doing today, and how is the clinic doing without her? Those are two big questions.
Well, we had a very good session with her up there. It was amazing. Here she was in the retirement home, but she was still helping others, and she was very, as a matter of fact, when we were up there, they had put her in lockdown because she was going out into trying to get out so she could see other people. And so but even there, she was ministering unto them. I tell you one thing, I don't want to skip over. I want to say a little bit more about the 60 Minutes that Jean mentioned, that Josh Howard, he was a producer. And I do want to read just a little bit, because he, I think, captures her personality as well. His words capture her personality. Sister Ann's soft-spoken yet impressively dynamic voice was powerful. The clinic's national donor base was growing, and she was tremendously thankful for any publicity the clinic received. But there was so much need. Howard said when he first went to Tutwiler to investigate whether they should do a 60 Minutes or not, to meet Ann Brooks and see the town, quote, "I never had met anyone like her. She exudes caring and kindness and a complete helpfulness. She was someone I could immediately relate to. I could see how her patients would so easily relate to her. The fact that she should come into Tutwiler, Mississippi, and so thoroughly understand the problems of the people, not just their health problems, but their way of life that was contributing to their health problems, is remarkable. She is so completely related, and yet she is a phenomenal fundraiser, a phenomenal administrator, and yet with this soft voice. And the back of the book, I want to say that we donated, we included 4 pages we needed 4 pages to list all the awards and honors Ann Brooke received while she was there at the Tutwiler Clinic. Everything from academic degrees, honorary degrees, to the Americans Award presented by the John F. Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., Doctor of Humane Letters honorary degree from LaSalle University, Humanitarian Award auxiliary to the American Osteopathic, Doctor of Medical Science honorary degree, Villanova University, Doctor of Humane honorary degree, Des Moines University, Award for Community Service, Mississippi Medical Association, on and on and on. And yet here she was just doing what she felt she was called to do.
That's amazing.
However, and before you, I just want to say, yet because she shared her private journals, we have some very reflective and beautiful writing, and almost poetic, and some of her descriptions of her heartaches with some of the people that she attended, and some are rather amazing. Jean, tell them about the birthing in the back seat.
Well, that was one of the examples of how her house was an emergency room after hours. People knew where she was, and when they got into trouble, the nearest hospital was 30 miles away. This one night, the man came banging on the door and said, "Baby, baby, baby." So she came out to the car, and in the car was a woman having birth to twins with this was her 5th and 6th child, and the other children were in the front seat, and the husband in the front seat, and Sister Ann in the back seat delivering this baby.
That's amazing. Oh, that's awesome. Well, we've got a few questions here, if you ladies from our audience, if y'all would be interested.
Sure.
Okay, great. We'll start with Mike Gallion. Says, Sally, you've written about 2 very powerful Mississippi Delta women. Can you compare the 2 women? He's talking about Betty Pearson Bobo and Sister Ann Brooks. That's an interesting question.
Betty is in our audience tonight.
Oh, great.
Maybe I wish that can Betty rephrase? Ann was Betty's physician, so that's an interesting way. I think in their own way, they were very, compare them, I would say they were very much alike in that they took the talents that they had and developed them, and the resources that they had, and applied them to strengthen and serve the community, and so much more than what you would expect one individual to accomplish.
Good answer.
Amen. Awesome. All right, here's another question. You kind of touched on this, Sally. You talked about Sister Ann's reflective writing. So Steve Yates says there are some beautiful prayers and poems and meditations of hers in the book. Can you talk about the intensity of her writing and her prayer life?
Well, you know, now I can't really talk about that because that was private, but she did share. She was, as far as when we started writing the book, she said, you can use anything you want, and you open up. When you were with her, she didn't proselytize at all. You wouldn't, in fact, I think that she wore her white coat instead of her, I guess all the time she was teaching, she probably wore her nun habit. And then, but in just meeting her with her doctors, she wasn't, she was like, I don't want to say private. She lived her religion. She lived her faith, but she didn't try to, she showed you that how the Spirit was moving her, but she didn't tell you. But she did write about it in her writings. And yes, we did include that. Plus, we also included a history of the civil rights movement a timeline
It's
that
wonderful.
she created because that was such an important factor in her life.
It was. In fact, one of our listeners, William Palmer, asked what's currently happening in Tutwiler. So this is a now question, but Kelly Fisher asked, was she threatened by racists because of what she did, or did she have some protection because she was a nun?
There was
Well,
one
the first week or two that she was there in Tutwiler, she found a Ku Klux Klan a flyer on her windshield when she had parked there at the clinic, and with a threatening note. So she took it off and came inside and threw it in the trash can and kind of tippy-toed around, and not in any way hiding, but she wondered, is anything going to happen? Nothing happened. And so
Thank God.
she just went along about her business. But here again, she did not preach integration. She lived it. And in fact, in all of her writings and of all the contacts, there is never a mention of the color of someone's skin. She was treating the whole person, and she just went beyond that. And so I don't know of any time. Jean, do you remember any time she was threatened?
No, I think she had the protection because the community needed her and loved her. They knew that her heart was there with them.
Thank God. Oh, wow. Two people are asking a similar question. I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm sorry. Mary Mungenest. She wants to know, how can I help promote the book and the memory of Anne and her accomplishments? And then similar to that, Sue Head says, thank you for sharing this fascinating and inspiring story. Did she operate on private donations, or did she receive government funding or grants? And is it still operating today?
Well, those are great things. I'll go kind of backwards on that. She largely she did get not government grants, but Medicare and Medicaid and those kind of things covered about a fourth of the expenses that she
raised the rest.
And the others came in through donations. And at one time, after the 60-minute program, she had some 21,000 donors across the nation, and she also, the Kellogg Foundation helped her renovate the building for the community center that was built by Maureen and Sister Maureen and Sister Ann, or Dr. Brooks. And as far as what is going on today, the Tutwiler Clinic is still operating, but it is now under the management of the Tallahatchie Community Health Program.
Okay.
And I do want to mention this as far as the promotion of the book. Please let everyone know about it, because I don't know what the royalties will be, but all of the royalties that are earned through the sale of this book are going to go to the clinic to continue their work.
Great. I meant to ask you about that. Thank you. Yeah, and this book and Sally's previous book about Delta Rainbow, are both available at Novel. And I think Sally and Jean, did y'all go in and sign copies of the Power of One? So people listening, please call Novel and reserve your signed copy of this, and you can pick it up, or they can send it to you, or however you want to get it. Let's see, I have a fun question here. Where did it go? Well, okay, here it is. Leslie Van Gelder. Is Leslie in New Zealand?
Yes.
Leslie says, you've been so amazing at capturing people's stories, Sally. Whose story, if you could explore anyone alive or dead, who would you like to explore next? Oh, she put you on the spot, didn't she?
Well, probably you, Leslie. As long as I can come down to New Zealand and interview you.
Oh, that's great.
No, I don't know. That is a good question. And I don't know. I think that it's, I don't have an answer to that.
These stories seem to find you, would be my answer. Someone's going to come knocking on your door like they have for these last 2 books, which is kind of a writer's dream. That has not happened to me yet. But so Nancy Lindman wants to know, has the problem of the dead animals and the sewage in the homes on the wrong side of the levee been solved?
Yes, I think so. Because the Corps of Engineers came in and has did the work that was necessary. And also one thing that was just really outstanding is a group of citizens there, well, in the area, became very involved with the clinic and the Habitat for Humanity. But they built, 40 houses right next to the clinic with indoor plumbing and such as that the people could live in. And Frank Michener, who was very involved in getting that started, I think
He donated the land.
I got an email from him. He couldn't, he said, he and Judith said they couldn't manage the Zoom, but anyway, they would get the book. But they were very, along with others, and Sister Maureen served as the head of the Habitat for Humanity and serving those houses. Jean, do you have any other thing that you can add?
Well, I wanted to have us hear from her one quote that she says, "It's not my job to change the system, but it's my job to make a ruckus." And I think that sums up what she did. She came into the middle of that early on. She says that the poverty and the grinding poverty that destroyed people's lives enraged her, but she took that rage and turned it into this energy that benefited the community so much.
Wow, she really, really did. Well, we're a little after 7. Nicole, are you ready to come back in? There you are.
Hey, this has been amazing, guys. This is so fascinating, and I'm so glad that you guys recorded the story of someone willing to make a ruckus to make change in the South. So thank you to all of you guys for joining, and thanks to Jean and Sally and Susan. We did record this, so we'll be posting this on our Novel Events YouTube page. I can actually send an email once we have this posted there. I'll send this to everybody who signed up through Eventbrite. So you'll have a link to share this, the event. And all of these ladies' books are available on novelmemphis.com, or you can call us or come by with a mask. We're still doing curbside too, so feel free to do that if you're not getting out much. But yeah, thank you to everybody, and we hope we'll see you in the store eventually, but for now, maybe we'll see you via screen sometime soon.
And I think we have a new hashtag, make a ruckus. I was thinking
Absolutely,
about
yeah,
good
let's all
trouble.
make a ruckus.
Hashtag make a ruckus. Sally certainly
Thank
does.
you.
Jean, thank you so much.
Susan.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Nicole.
have a good night.
Nicole.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.